The Johnson family had always been known for their big, lively gatherings. Every year, they came together at their grandmother Eleanor's countryside home to celebrate the holidays. It was a tradition that everyone looked forward to, adults catching up over cups of coffee, children running wild in the backyard, and the smell of delicious food filling every corner of the house. This year was no different. Cars lined the driveway, and laughter echoed through the halls as relatives hugged and greeted one another. Among the crowd was Maya, a bright and curious 10-year-old girl who loved drawing and telling stories. She sat quietly on a chair near the window, her sketchbook open on her lap. Her pencil moved quickly across the page, creating pictures of trees, animals, and imaginary worlds. Maya wasn't like the other kids in the family. She was adopted, and she was biracial. Her skin a warm shade of brown, unlike most of her cousins, who shared the same pale complexion as their grandmother. While Maya felt loved by her parents, Marcus and Lisa, she often sensed that something was missing when it came to how others treated her. And deep down, she knew why. Eleanor, the matriarch of the family, was a strong-willed woman with old-fashioned ideas about life. To some people, she seemed kind and generous, but there was a side to her that only a few understood. For years, Marcus had noticed how his mother acted differently toward Maya compared to her other grandchildren. Eleanor never said anything mean or hurtful, at least not out loud, but her actions spoke louder than words. She rarely asked Maya questions about school or her hobbies, didn't attend her art shows, and sometimes even forgot to include her in group photos. Marcus, Maya's father, stood nearby, watching his daughter from across the room. His heart swelled with pride seeing how focused she was on her artwork, but he couldn't ignore the sadness creeping into his thoughts. He remembered countless moments where he wanted to confront his mother about her behavior. "She'll grow out of it," Eleanor would say whenever he brought it up. But Marcus knew better. This wasn't just a phase, it was prejudice, hidden behind polite smiles and excuses. Today, however, Marcus felt uneasy. Something in the air told him this gathering might be different. As the day went on, Eleanor bustled around the house, making sure everything was perfect for her guests. She checked the dining table, adjusted flower arrangements, and reminded everyone to wash their hands before dinner. But when it came time for her favorite part of the evening, the gift-giving tradition, Marcus braced himself. Every year, Eleanor handed out personalized gifts to each grandchild. It was a ritual she cherished, and the kids loved it too. They'd gather around eagerly, waiting to see what special treasure Grandma had picked out for them. Marcus glanced at Maya, who was still absorbed in her drawing. He wondered if this year would finally be the one where Eleanor included her fully, if she'd remember that Maya was just as much a part of the family as anyone else. As the clock ticked closer to the moment of truth, Marcus clenched his fists slightly. He didn't know what he'd do if his mother ignored Maya again. But one thing was certain. Tonight, he wouldn't stay silent. Not anymore. The room grew quieter as Eleanor cleared her throat and called everyone to attention. With a smile, she began pulling wrapped presents from a large wicker basket. One by one, she called the grandchildren forward, handing them their gifts. Each child squealed with delight, hugging her tightly before rushing off to unwrap their treasures. But as the pile of gifts dwindled, Maya noticed something unsettling. There were no more names being called, and nothing left for her. Her heart sank as she realized what was happening. She tried to keep her composure, looking down at her sketchbook to hide the tears welling up in her eyes. Across the room, Marcus saw the look on his daughter's face. His chest tightened, and anger bubbled inside him. This wasn't right. And tonight, he decided, things would change for good. The living room buzzed with excitement as Eleanor stood in the center, holding a large wicker basket filled with beautifully wrapped gifts. The grandchildren gathered around her like moths to a flame, their eyes wide with anticipation. Each child waited eagerly for their name to be called, their faces lighting up whenever Eleanor smiled and handed over a present. "Sarah," Eleanor announced, her voice warm and cheerful. Sarah, a bubbly 8-year-old with curly blonde hair, skipped forward. She took the gift from her grandmother's hands and tore open the wrapping paper. Ins. Next came Ethan. He grinned ear to ear when he unwrapped a leather-bound journal engraved with his initials. "This is so cool," he said, flipping through its blank pages. Then there was Liam, who received a custom chess set made of polished wood. One by one, every grandchild got something special, something that showed how much thought Eleanor had put into choosing just the right thing for each of them. But as the pile of gifts grew smaller, Maya felt her stomach tighten. She sat quietly in the corner, clutching her sketchbook tightly against her chest. Her heart raced as she watched her cousins unwrap their treasures, laugh, and hug their grandmother. She tried to focus on the drawings in front of her, but her mind kept drifting back to the basket. Was there anything left for her? When the last gift was handed out, a shiny new soccer ball for little Ben, Maya froze. There was nothing left in the basket. No more names were called. No one seemed to notice, except for Maya herself and her father, Marcus. The room was alive with chatter and laughter, but for Maya, everything felt muffled, distant. Her cheeks burned red as she stared at the floor, trying hard not to cry. Across the room, Marcus saw the look on his daughter's face, his jaw clenched, and his fists tightened involuntarily. He glanced at Lisa, his wife, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. They both knew what was happening, even if no one else did, or wanted to admit it. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't carelessness. It was deliberate. Eleanor, oblivious to the tension brewing in the room, began chatting with some of the other adults about how happy the kids looked. "I always loved seeing their faces light up during this part," she said with a satisfied smile. But her words only fueled Marcus's frustration. How could she stand there, smiling and talking about happiness, while ignoring the pain she'd caused? As the children ran off to play with their new toys, Marcus decided enough was enough. He walked over to where Maya sat, still clutching her sketchbook. Kneeling beside her, he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" he asked softly. Maya nodded, though tears glistened in her eyes. She didn't want to make a scene or embarrass her dad, but it was clear she was hurt. Marcus stood up, his expression calm but determined. He turned to face his mother, who was now sipping tea and chatting with Aunt Susan. "Mom," he said firmly, cutting through the conversation. Everyone nearby fell silent, startled by the tone of his voice. Even the kids paused their games to see what was happening. "Yes, dear," Eleanor replied, looking slightly confused. Marcus crossed his arms and took a step closer. "Why didn't you have a gift for Maya?" The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. For a moment, no one spoke. Eleanor blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, well," she stammered, fumbling for an excuse. "I must have forgotten this year. You know how busy things get." "That's not good enough," Marcus interrupted, his voice steady but sharp. "Maya is your granddaughter, too. She deserves to feel loved and included, just like everyone else." The room went completely silent. Some relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others exchanged nervous glances. A few whispered among themselves, unsure of what to say or do. Maya sat motionless, her head bowed, wishing she could disappear. Lisa joined Marcus, standing tall beside him. Her presence sent a clear message. They were united in this. "We're not letting this slide anymore," she added, her voice firm but kind. "If we don't address it now, nothing will ever change." Eleanor opened her mouth to respond but closed it again, unable to find the right words. Tears welled up in her eyes, though whether from guilt or frustration, no one could tell. The weight of the moment settled heavily over the room, and for the first time in years, someone had dared to challenge her behavior openly. Marcus turned back to Maya, kneeling once more. "You deserve better than this, sweetheart," he said, pulling her into a tight hug. "And I promise you, things will change." For Maya, those words carried a flicker of hope, but also uncertainty. Would anything really change? Or would this moment fade away like all the others before it? Only time would tell. The tension in the room was thick, like a storm cloud hovering just above everyone's heads. Marcus stood tall, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed firmly on his mother. Eleanor shifted uncomfortably under his stare, her hands trembling slightly as she set down her teacup. She glanced around the room, hoping someone, anyone, would step in to lighten the mood or change the subject. But no one did. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. "Marcus," Eleanor finally managed to say, her voice shaky. "It was an honest mistake. I promise I'll make it up to Maya next time." But Marcus didn't back down. His voice remained calm, yet firm. "Next time isn't good enough, Mom. This keeps happening, not just with gifts, but with everything." You treat Maya differently because she's adopted, because she doesn't look like the rest of us, and that has to stop." Eleanor's face flushed red, partly from embarrassment and partly from frustration. "I don't know what you're talking about," she snapped, though her tone lacked conviction. "I've always been fair to all my grandchildren." "That's not true," Marcus replied, his voice rising slightly. "You never ask about her school projects or go to her art shows. You barely even acknowledge her unless someone else brings her up. Do you think I haven't noticed? Do you think she hasn't noticed?" Maya sat quietly nearby, clutching her sketchbook tightly against her chest. Her eyes darted between her father and her grandmother, unsure of what to do or say. She wanted to disappear, to crawl under the couch and wait until the argument ended. But at the same time, a small part of her felt grateful that someone, her dad, was finally standing up for her. Lisa stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Marcus's arm. "We're not trying to attack you, Eleanor," she said gently but firmly. "We're asking you to see Maya for who she is, your granddaughter. She deserves the same love and attention as every other child in this family." Some of the relatives began whispering among themselves. Aunt Susan nodded approvingly, while Uncle Greg shook his head, muttering something about making a mountain out of a molehill. Others avoided eye contact altogether, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation unfolding before them. The kids, sensing the seriousness of the situation, had stopped playing and were now watching wide-eyed from the sidelines. Eleanor looked at her son, then at Lisa, and finally at Maya. Tears welled up in her eyes, though whether they were tears of guilt or stubbornness, no one could tell. I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she said softly, her voice breaking. "It's just, things are different now than they used to be. Sometimes I don't know how to keep up." "That's not an excuse," Marcus said, his tone softening slightly. He walked over to Maya and knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Mom, you raised me to be kind and fair. So why can't you extend that same kindness to Maya? She's part of this family too. If you can't accept her, then maybe you're not ready to be part of ours." The words hit hard. Eleanor gasped, visibly shaken by the implication. For years, she had brushed off criticism about her behavior, dismissing it as oversensitivity or misunderstanding. But hearing those words from her own son, that he might choose his daughter over her, was something she hadn't expected. It forced her to confront the reality of her actions in a way she couldn't ignore. Maya looked up at her father, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She wanted to believe him, to trust that things could change. But deep down, she wasn't sure. What if nothing really changed? What if this moment was forgotten tomorrow? As the room fell silent again, Marcus turned to Maya and gave her a small smile. "You deserve better than this, sweetheart," he whispered, pulling her into a tight hug. "And I'm going to make sure you get it." For the first time in a long while, Maya felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could be different. But only time would tell. The rest of the evening passed in an awkward haze. After Marcus's pointed words, the energy in the room shifted dramatically. Some relatives tried to resume their conversations, but they were stilted and forced. Others avoided eye contact altogether, pretending not to notice the tension still lingering in the air. Eleanor retreated to the kitchen, claiming she needed to check on dessert, though everyone knew it was just an excuse to escape the uncomfortable scene. Marcus stayed behind with Maya, holding her close as she quietly flipped through her sketchbook. He could feel her trembling slightly, though she tried hard to act like everything was fine. "It's okay to be upset, sweetheart," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You don't have to hide your feelings from me." Maya nodded, but didn't say anything. Her eyes were glued to the page, where she had started sketching a picture of a bird trapped inside a cage. It wasn't lost on Marcus what the drawing symbolized: her feelings of being excluded, of wanting freedom and acceptance. He sighed, his heart breaking for his daughter. Lisa joined them a few minutes later, sitting beside Maya and wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We're so proud of you, Maya," she said softly. "And we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. You deserve to feel loved by everyone in this family, not just us." Maya finally looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think Grandma will ever really change?" Marcus hesitated before answering. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but he also didn't want to lie. I don't know, sweetheart, he admitted honestly. But I do know one thing. If she can't treat you the way you deserve, then maybe she isn't ready to be part of our lives. And that's not your fault. It's hers. Later that night, after most of the guests had left and the house grew quiet, Marcus decided it was time to have a serious conversation with his mother. He found her in the living room, sitting alone on the couch with a cup of tea in her hands. Her eyes were red, evidence that she had been crying. For a moment, Marcus felt a pang of guilt, but he quickly reminded himself why he was there. Mom, he began, taking a seat across from her, we need to talk about what happened tonight. Eleanor looked at him, her expression a mix of sadness and defiance. I already told you, I'll make it up to Maya next time. What more do you want from me? I want you to understand how your actions affect her, Marcus replied, his voice steady. This isn't just about forgetting a gift. It's about years of treating her differently because she doesn't fit into your idea of what a granddaughter should look like. She's biracial, Mom. She's adopted. None of that makes her any less deserving of your love and respect. Eleanor opened her mouth to argue but stopped herself. Instead, she stared down at her teacup, her hands shaking slightly. I never meant to hurt her, she murmured. I don't always know how to connect with her. She's so different from the others. That's no excuse, Marcus said firmly. Love isn't about finding someone who's exactly like you. It's about embracing their differences and making them feel valued. If you can't do that, then you're failing as a grandmother. The words struck a nerve. Eleanor flinched, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly consider the impact of her behavior, not just on Maya, but on the entire family. Was she really the person Marcus described? Someone who couldn't see beyond her own biases? After a long pause, she spoke, her voice barely audible. What do I do, Marcus? How do I fix this? Marcus softened slightly, seeing the vulnerability in his mother's eyes. Start by apologizing, not just with words, but with actions. Show Maya that she matters to you. Go to her art shows, ask her about her day, include her in things. And most importantly, stop treating her like she's separate from the rest of the family. Eleanor nodded slowly, wiping her tears. I'll try, she promised. For you, and for Maya. As Marcus stood up to leave, he felt a glimmer of hope. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but at least his mother was willing to take the first step. Whether she followed through remained to be seen, but for now, it was enough. The days following the family gathering were quiet but heavy with unspoken emotions. Eleanor spent much of her time alone in her home, replaying the events of that evening over and over in her mind. She couldn't shake the image of Maya sitting silently in the corner, clutching her sketchbook, or the look of disappointment on Marcus's face when he confronted her. For years, she had dismissed her son's concerns about how she treated Maya, brushing them off as misunderstandings or oversensitivity. But now, for the first time, she allowed herself to truly reflect on her actions, and it wasn't a comfortable realization. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table one afternoon, staring out the window at the sprawling countryside view she loved so much. Her hands rested on an old photo album she hadn't opened in years. Slowly, she flipped through its pages, stopping at pictures of Marcus as a child. There he was, her little boy, grinning widely as he held up his first fishing rod, or standing proudly beside her in front of their Christmas tree. As she traced her fingers over the faded images, memories came flooding back, memories of times when she herself had felt excluded or judged by others. She remembered being young, growing up in a strict household where conformity was prized above all else. Back then, she had struggled to find her own voice, often feeling like she didn't quite belong, and yet here she was, decades later, doing the very thing she had once resented, making someone else feel unwelcome because they didn't fit into her narrow definition of family. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought about Maya, the bright, artistic girl who always seemed to carry herself with quiet grace despite the challenges she faced. How many times had Eleanor ignored her? How many opportunities had she missed to show her love and support? The weight of these realizations pressed down on her chest, leaving her breathless. That night, Eleanor decided she needed to talk to Marcus again, not to defend herself, but to understand. She called him and asked if she could visit the next day. To her relief, he agreed. When Eleanor arrived at Marcus and Lisa's house, she found them sitting together in the living room. Maya was upstairs working on a new drawing, unaware of her grandmother's presence. Eleanor hesitated in the doorway, unsure of what to say. But Marcus gestured for her to sit, his expression calm but guarded. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Eleanor began, her voice trembling. "About how I've treated Maya, and how wrong I've been." Marcus nodded, encouraging her to continue. "I never meant to hurt her," Eleanor admitted, tears streaming down her face. "But I see now that my actions have caused pain, not just for Maya, but for all of you. I let my fears and insecurities get in the way of seeing her for who she truly is, my granddaughter." Lisa leaned forward, her tone gentle but firm. "It's not too late to make things right, Eleanor. Maya deserves to feel loved and included, just like any other child in this family. And we're here to help you take those steps, if you're willing." Eleanor wiped her tears and nodded. "I am willing. I want to do better, for Marcus, for Maya, and for myself." Marcus studied his mother carefully, searching for sincerity in her words. After a long pause, he spoke. "This won't be easy. It'll take more than apologies. It'll take consistent effort. You'll need to show Maya that you care, not just today, but every day moving forward." "I know," Eleanor replied, her voice full of determination, "and I'm ready to try." With that, Marcus invited Maya downstairs. When she entered the room, she looked surprised to see her grandmother there. Eleanor stood up, took a deep breath, and walked over to her. "Maya," she said softly, "I owe you an apology. I haven't treated you the way I should have, and I'm so sorry for that. You're my granddaughter, and I love you more than words can say. I promise to do better from now on." For a moment, Maya simply stared at her, unsure of what to say. Then, slowly, she nodded and gave Eleanor a small, tentative hug. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. A fragile yet hopeful beginning to healing the rift between them. In the days that followed Eleanor's heartfelt apology, she began to take small but meaningful steps toward rebuilding her relationship with Maya. At first, it felt awkward, like trying to mend a broken vase without knowing where all the pieces fit. But Eleanor was determined. She knew actions spoke louder than words, and if she wanted Maya to trust her again, she had to prove herself. One afternoon, Eleanor decided to visit Marcus and Lisa's home unannounced. She carried a small wrapped box in her hands, its edges neatly taped and tied with a bright ribbon. When she arrived, Maya was sitting at the dining table, working on a colorful painting of a sunset. Her face lit up with concentration as she dabbed her brush across the canvas, oblivious to her grandmother's presence. Eleanor knocked softly on the door, and Lisa greeted her with a warm but cautious smile. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. "Maya's in the dining room." Eleanor nodded and made her way inside. Her heart raced as she approached Maya, who looked up in surprise. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Eleanor cleared her throat and held out the gift. "Maya, I brought you something," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's not much, but I hope you like it." Maya hesitated before taking the box. She glanced at her mother, who gave her an encouraging nod, then carefully untied the ribbon and peeled back the wrapping paper. Inside was a beautifully crafted wooden easel, complete with paints, brushes, and a set of high-quality sketchbooks. Maya's eyes widened in awe. It was perfect, a gift tailored specifically to her passion for art. "I thought about how much you love drawing and painting," Eleanor explained, her cheeks flushed with nervousness. "I wanted to give you something that would help you create even more beautiful things." For a moment, Maya simply stared at the easel, unsure of what to say. Then, slowly, a small smile spread across her face. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's amazing." Eleanor let out a shaky breath, relief washing over her. "You're welcome, sweetheart," she replied, her own voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of your talent, and I want to support it." The two shared a tentative hug, their connection still fragile but undeniably growing stronger. As they pulled apart, Maya noticed tears glistening in her grandmother's eyes. It was strange seeing Eleanor this way, vulnerable, almost fragile, but it also made her seem more human, more relatable. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor continued to make an effort. She attended one of Maya's school art shows, standing quietly in the corner as Maya proudly displayed her latest creations. Afterward, she complimented her work, asking thoughtful questions about her inspiration and techniques. Though Maya remained reserved at first, she gradually began to open up, sharing stories about her favorite pieces and explaining the meaning behind certain colors or shapes. Eleanor also started sending Maya handwritten letters, filled with encouraging words and little drawings she'd attempted herself. In one letter, she wrote, "I'm learning too, Maya. Every day, I'm trying to be better for you, for our family, and for myself." Asterisk, these small gestures meant the world to Maya, showing her that her grandmother truly cared. Meanwhile, Marcus and Lisa watched these developments closely. They were cautious but hopeful. While they didn't expect everything to change overnight, they could see that Eleanor was making genuine progress. And Maya, though still guarded, seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight she'd been carrying for years was finally beginning to lift. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Eleanor surprised everyone by announcing her plans to host a special art-themed gathering at her house. "I want to celebrate Maya's creativity," she explained, smiling warmly at her granddaughter. "And maybe learn a thing or two myself." Maya beamed, feeling a sense of pride she hadn't experienced before. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly seen, not just by her parents, but by her grandmother too. It was a new chapter, full of uncertainty but also brimming with possibility. And though challenges lay ahead, there was no denying that something beautiful was beginning to bloom. Eleanor's art-themed gathering was set for a crisp autumn Saturday, and the anticipation buzzed through the Johnson family like electricity. For weeks leading up to the event, Eleanor threw herself into preparations with an energy that surprised everyone. She transformed her living room into a cozy gallery, complete with easels, paints, and sketchbooks scattered around for guests to use. On one wall, she hung some of Maya's artwork, bright, bold pieces that captured the imagination and told stories only Maya could dream up. Maya, meanwhile, felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. It wasn't just another family gathering. It was her asterisk moment, a celebration of something deeply personal and important to her. As much as she appreciated her grandmother's efforts, part of her wondered if this was all too good to be true. Could Eleanor really change, or was this just another fleeting attempt to make things right? On the day of the gathering, the house filled with laughter and chatter as relatives arrived. The kids ran around exploring the art supplies, while adults sipped tea and admired Maya's work on display. Eleanor stood near the entrance, greeting each guest with a warm smile. When Maya walked in, holding her parents' hands, Eleanor immediately noticed her hesitation. "Maya, sweetheart," Eleanor said, stepping forward, "come see what we've done." Her voice was soft but full of pride. She led Maya to the wall where her artwork hung, framed neatly and lit by soft spotlights. "This is your space today. Everyone is here to celebrate you asterisk." Maya's eyes widened as she took in the sight. Her heart swelled with emotion, though she tried hard not to cry. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's perfect." The afternoon unfolded with creativity and joy. Relatives who had never picked up a paintbrush before tried their hand at watercolors, giggling at their clumsy attempts. Even Uncle Greg, known for his gruff demeanor, joined in, sketching stick figures that made the kids roar with laughter. Eleanor stayed close to Maya throughout, asking questions about her techniques and offering quiet words of encouragement. At one point, she even sat down beside her granddaughter and attempted to paint her own sunset, a lopsided orange blob against streaks of purple, but Maya thought it was wonderful. Later, Eleanor gathered everyone in the living room to say a few words. Standing nervously in front of the group, she cleared her throat and began. "I want to thank all of you for coming today, especially Maya," she said, glancing at her granddaughter with a tender smile. "This gathering isn't just about art. It's about learning to see each other more clearly, to embrace our differences instead of letting them divide us." Her voice grew steadier as she continued. "Maya has taught me so much these past few months, not just about painting or drawing, but about kindness, patience, and love. She reminds me every day that being a family means accepting one another exactly as we are, and I'm grateful for her." Tears glistened in Maya's eyes as she listened. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply hugged her grandmother tightly. The room erupted in applause, and for a brief moment, everything felt lighter, as if years of tension were finally beginning to melt away. Afterward, Marcus pulled his mother aside. "You're doing great, Mom," he said, his tone sincere. "But remember, this is just the start. Keep showing Maya you care, and don't give up when things get tough." Eleanor nodded, her resolve firm. "I won't," she promised. "Not this time." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the countryside, the family lingered together, sharing stories and laughter. Maya watched her grandmother interact with her cousins, laughing at their silly drawings and cheering them on. Something inside her shifted, a tiny spark of hope flickering to life. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to heal, not just for themselves, but for the entire family. The next holiday season rolled around, and the Johnson family gathered once again at Eleanor's countryside home. This time, however, the atmosphere felt different, lighter, warmer, more inclusive. The house was decorated with twinkling lights and garlands, but the real glow came from the relationships that had begun to mend over the past year. Everyone could sense it, even if they didn't say it aloud. Eleanor buzzed around the kitchen early in the morning, preparing snacks and setting up tables. She hummed softly to herself, a habit she'd picked up when she was nervous or excited. Today, she was both. For months, she had worked hard to show Maya, and the rest of the family, that she was serious about change. Every art show Maya participated in, Eleanor attended. Every drawing Maya brought home, Eleanor praised. And every conversation they shared, no matter how small, brought them closer together. When the grandchildren arrived, their laughter filled the house like music. Maya walked in holding her parents' hands, her sketchbook tucked under one arm. She looked around the room, taking in the familiar faces and the festive decorations, then turned to see her grandmother standing nearby, smiling warmly. "Welcome, sweetheart," Eleanor said, pulling Maya into a tight hug. "I'm so glad you're here." Maya hugged her back, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when old habits crept in, times when Eleanor stumbled or forgot. But Maya knew her grandmother was trying. That effort meant everything. As the day went on, Eleanor announced it was time for the annual gift-giving tradition. The grandchildren gathered eagerly around her, their eyes sparkling with anticipation. One by one, she called their names, handing out personalized gifts just as she always did. But this year, when she reached Maya's name, there was no hesitation, no awkward pause. Instead, Eleanor smiled brightly and handed her a beautifully wrapped box tied with a satin ribbon. Maya unwrapped it carefully, revealing a leather-bound portfolio embossed with her initials. Inside were high-quality art supplies, charcoal pencils, watercolor sets, and fine brushes, along with a handwritten note from Eleanor. Asterisk to my talented granddaughter, asterisk it read. Asterisk keep creating, keep dreaming, and know that I'm always cheering you on. Asterisk. Tears welled up in Maya's eyes as she hugged her grandmother tightly. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered. "This is amazing." Across the room, Marcus watched the exchange, his heart swelling with pride. He glanced at Lisa, who gave him a knowing smile. They had worried for so long about whether Eleanor would truly change, but now they could see the progress clearly. It wasn't just about gifts or gestures. It was about love, acceptance, and understanding. Later that evening, as the family sat around the fireplace sharing stories and sipping hot cocoa, Eleanor stood up to speak. "I want to thank all of you for sticking with me through this journey," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "Especially Maya. You've taught me what it means to be a better person, to love without limits or conditions. I may not get it right every time, but I promise to keep trying, because you're my family, and I love you all." The room erupted in applause, and Maya beamed, feeling a deep sense of belonging for the first time in years. She realized then that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about building something stronger together, a future where everyone felt valued and loved. As the fire crackled softly in the background, the Johnson family laughed, talked, and embraced. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but they faced it together, with courage, hope, and an unshakable bond. And in that moment, they knew they were ready for whatever came next. Asterisk, asterisk, end asterisk, asterisk.